Here's a question I want you to sit with for a second. What if the biggest threat to your retirement isn't the stock market, it isn't inflation, it isn't even a recession? It's something almost nobody brings up at dinner parties and financial seminars or even with their own advisor. And if you're 50, 60, or already retired, this one risk can quietly undo decades of careful saving without you ever seeing it coming. I'm talking about longevity risk. In plain English, the risk of living longer than your money does. Ask yourself right now, if you had to guess, how many years do you think your retirement savings need to last? Most people picture retiring at 65 and maybe living to 80, so they plan for about 15 years. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If you're a healthy 65-year-old today, there's a real chance you or your spouse could live into your 90s. That's not 15 years of retirement, that's 25, even 30. And that changes everything about how much you need, how you invest, and how you spend. This isn't about scaring you. It's about making sure you're planning for the retirement you're actually going to have, not the one you assumed you'd have. In this video, I'm going to walk you through why this risk gets overlooked, what it actually costs you if you ignore it, and, most importantly, 5 concrete things you can do this month to protect yourself against outliving your savings. Quick note before we dive in. Everyone's financial picture is different, so treat everything here as a general starting point, not personal advice. Now let's get into it.
Point 1. You're probably underestimating how long you'll live. Here's the core problem. When most people plan for retirement, they picture an average life expectancy, something like 78 to 82, and they build their whole plan around that number. But averages are misleading because they include people who pass away young, which pulls the number down. If you make it to 65 in reasonably good health, your realistic life expectancy is often longer than the national average suggests. And if you're planning as a couple, the math shifts again, because you only need one of you to live a long time for your household to need decades of income. Imagine a couple. We'll call them Linda and Tom, both 62. They plan around living to 85. But Linda's mother lived to 94, and Linda is healthy, active, and doesn't smoke. If Linda lives to 94 too, that's nearly a decade longer than their plan accounted for. A decade with no paycheck, no pension growth, just savings that have to stretch further than expected. The action step here is simple. Don't plan around average life expectancy. Plan around a longer runway. Many financial planners suggest building your plan assuming you or your spouse could live into your 90s, then adjusting from there. Today, do this. Pull up your retirement projection, whether it's in a spreadsheet or through your advisor, and check what age it assumes you'll live to. If it's under 90, that's worth revisiting. Point 2. Your spending doesn't shrink the way you think it will. A lot of retirement advice assumes spending drops steadily as you age. Less travel, less activity, lower costs. And that's often true when you're 60s and early 70s. But here's what gets left out of that story. Healthcare and care-related costs tend to rise sharply in your 80s, often right when your other spending is going down. So instead of a smooth decline, many retirees see a smile pattern. Spending starts high, dips in the middle years, then climbs again later in life due to medical needs, mobility support, or long-term care. Think about James, a 68-year-old widower. In his late 60s, his spending was modest. He'd downsized his home, wasn't traveling as much, and felt financially comfortable. But by his mid-80s, he needed in-home care a few days a week, and those costs alone added hundreds of dollars a week to his budget, something his original plan never accounted for because it assumed spending would just keep dropping. So here's your action step. When you're building or reviewing your retirement budget, don't assume a straight downward line. Build in a separate estimate for later life costs, even a rough placeholder, for things like in-home help, mobility equipment, or assisted living. If this is the first time you've thought about that number, that's exactly why we're talking about this today. If either of those 2 points made you pause, drop a comment with your current age. I'm curious how many of us in this audience are sitting right around that 55 to 65 range where this risk really starts to matter. Point 3. Your money has to keep growing, not just get spent down. Here's a mindset shift that trips a lot of people up. Once you retire, it's tempting to think of your savings as a fixed pile that you slowly withdraw from until it's gone, like a jar of coins. But if your retirement could last 25 or 30 years, your money can't just sit still. It still needs to grow, because inflation doesn't stop just because you stopped working. Even a modest average inflation rate of around 3% a year can roughly double your cost of living over a 20 to 25-year retirement. That means the coffee that costs $4 today could cost close to $8 by the time you're in your mid-80s. Your grocery bill, your utilities, your property taxes, all of it keeps climbing. If your money isn't positioned to grow at all during retirement, you're not just spending it down, you're watching it lose purchasing power at the same time. The action step: review how your retirement savings are invested right now, today if you can. A common mistake is shifting everything into ultra-conservative, low-growth investments the moment you retire. But if you might need that money to last 30 years, some portion of it may still need room to grow. This isn't about taking big risks. It's about making sure your money isn't quietly shrinking in real terms while it sits there. Point 4. Waiting too long to talk about this makes your options shrink. Here's the part that really deserves more attention than it gets. The earlier you plan for a longer than expected retirement, the more tools you have available: adjusting your savings rate, delaying a pension or benefit claim, exploring products designed to guarantee income for life. But the later you wait, the fewer options you have, and the more likely you are to face hard, reactive decisions instead of calm, proactive ones. Let me tell you about a couple I'll call Rita and Dave, both 64. They hadn't seriously discussed how long their money needed to last. They were focused on getting to retirement, not what retirement itself might look like at 90. When Rita's father unexpectedly needed years of long-term care in his late 80s, it was a wake-up call. They realized they had never stress-tested their own plan for a similar scenario. The good news? Because they were still a year out from retiring, they had time to adjust. They revisited their withdrawal plan, delayed one of their benefit claims to increase guaranteed future income, and had an honest conversation about what they'd do if one of them needed extended care. Not everyone catches it that early, and that's exactly the point of this video: to have that conversation now while you still have options, instead of at 80 when the choices are far more limited. Pause the video for a second if you need to, and actually think about this. If you or your spouse needed years of extra care later in life, does your current plan have an answer for that? I'll wait. If the honest answer is "I'm not sure," that's not a failure, that's just useful information you now have.
Point 5. You're planning for one lifespan, but really, you're planning for two. If you're married or partnered, this is the piece that gets missed most often. It's not just about how long you live, it's about how long the survivor lives. Often, one spouse manages the household finances more closely than the other. If that person passes away first, the surviving spouse can be left not only grieving, but suddenly needing to understand and manage a financial plan they were never fully part of, sometimes for another 10, 15, or 20 years on their own. So here's the action step, and it might be the most important one in this whole video. Make sure both partners understand the full financial picture. Not just where the accounts are, but how withdrawals work, what income sources exist, and what the plan is if one of you is managing this alone for 2 decades. If that's not the case in your household right now, block off 1 hour this week and go through it together. Quick recap: the biggest risk nobody talks about isn't a market crash. It's simply living a long, full life without a plan built to match it. Longevity is something to prepare for, not fear. So here's your one action step to walk away with today. This week, find your current retirement projection, whether it's a spreadsheet, an app, or something your advisor sent you, and check one number. What age does it assume you'll live to? If that number feels too low, that's your starting point for a conversation, either with your spouse or with a financial professional. And again, a quick reminder: everyone's situation is different, so use everything in this video as a general starting point, not personalized advice for your exact circumstances. If this video got you thinking about how much you'll actually need month to month in retirement, that's exactly what I'm covering next. I'll walk you through how to calculate your real retirement number in about 10 minutes, so make sure to check that video out next. And if you found this helpful, hit subscribe so you don't miss it. I'm covering these kinds of overlooked risks every week, and this is exactly the community that needs to be talking about them.